I call the August 26th, 2021 City Council special meeting and possible executive session to order. City Clerk Ben Lane, please conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega,
Present.
Vice Mayor Betty Janik,
Present.
Council members Tammy Caputi,
Here.
Tom Durham,
Here.
Kathy Littlefield,
Here.
Linda Milhaven.
Here.
And Solange Whitehead.
Here.
City Manager Jim Thompson,
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott,
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews,
Here.
and the City Clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss and consult with the city's attorneys for legal advice regarding the potential development of real property located near the intersection of 94th Street and Bell Road in Scottsdale, Arizona. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. I have a motion. I have a second. Please register your vote. Thank you. We are now adjourned into executive session.
As I was saying. What? Oh, that's too fun. Why is this headquarters awesome for that whole road? In a really weird spot for a corporate headquarters, and I think, but nationwide was like lose your mind. That's what I wanted. Of course, he shot at someone down before I could actually say anything, but that would have been my thought. Well, and they really I just think it's so funny the way they fall all over each other, putting in the corporate headquarters, but I don't have lesson preserve. Why is that so like yay? I don't understand. What are they gonna tell the neighbors? Right, let them go there. Scottsdale, we don't have this. 64th and the 101 is a way better address. That's where my gym is. We just finished a project there that ASU Science Building. It's a beautiful intersection. There's a million apartments right there. That's a better location. I would just count those running out. Way better access. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. We never really think. There we go. Crazy. Yeah.
I call the August 26, 2021 City Council regular meeting to order. City Clerk Ben Lane, will you please conduct the roll call?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor David Ortega,
Present.
Vice Mayor Betty Janik,
Present.
Council members Tammy Caputi,
Here.
Tom Durham,
Present.
Kathy Littlefield,
Here.
Linda Milhaven.
Here.
And Solange Whitehead.
Here.
City Manager Jim Thompson,
Here.
City Attorney Sherry Scott,
Here.
City Treasurer Sonia Andrews,
Here.
City Auditor Sharon Walker,
Here.
and the City Clerk is present. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. We have Scottsdale Police Officer Anthony Wells and Dustin Patrick, as well as firefighter Josh Porter. If anyone requires assistance, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good evening. I invite all students who live or go to school in Scottsdale to participate in our We the People Constitution Day contest. This contest promotes civic engagement, community reflection, and understanding of the principles that guide our participation in this representative form of government. Entries are due September 17th, which is the official day of our U.S. Constitution, and 87. If you know of a student, a mom or a parent, please go to the City of Scottsdale's website, search Constitution, and you will find how to participate. This year, the celebration will be later in October, and entries will include a variety of art projects, essays, and so we'll leave it to the children to come up with these ideas, and of all ages. At this point, we will begin public comment. We call to the public to speak on any non-agendized items which are within the council's jurisdiction. However, they have to be non-agendized item. No official action can be taken by the council, but we are here to listen, and every participant will have 3 minutes. We received a request for one in person. So if you could please come forward, state your name, address, and welcome.
Hi there, Mayor Ortega, council members. My name's Deb Lovas, and my address is on record. I've lived in North Scottsdale for over 29 years, homeowner. And I am here on behalf of myself and 44 other Los Portones homeowners that we would like to present a petition of concern regarding the Rawhide or the Miller Road expansion. We, the homeowners in Los Portones townhomes, whose property is adjacent to Miller Road, will be greatly affected by the Miller Road expansion project. Our enjoyment of outdoor patio lifestyle will be diminished with noise and lights. The degree of infringement may not be known initially. Thus, we are petitioning the Scottsdale City Council to hear and address our current and future concerns regarding noise and light abatement, security, landscaping options, including berms, and overall aesthetics of the Miller Road expansion. We understand that according to an initial draft noise analysis technical report of stated areas submitted on April 12, 2021, that was based on the City of Scottsdale Roadway Noise Abatement Policy, Section 11, the statement of likelihood that no barriers were evaluated or recommended for this project. Also, the report states that a final determination of noise abatement measures will be made upon completion of the project design, the public involvement process concurrent with the COS, RNAP, and city approval. It is our understanding, based on the roadway noise abatement policy options, that the cost cap per benefited developed property based on $2,010 is $60,000. 60,000 times the 25 Miller Road Los Portones townhome owners is 1.5 million. Therefore, it is expected that these monies be applied to cover additional landscape options, including a berm and/or wall along the for maintenance of such. We also are aware that the current design calls for a sidewalk and multi-use trail on each side of the road. This design does not designate any space for additional landscape in the southern area, both for now or in the future. We believe that the trail space on the west side be best utilized for landscaping now and be available to provide noise abatement strategies in the future. We believe the trail on the east side along with the sidewalks and both sides can meet the user's needs from Pinnacle Peak to the bridge. Our ask of the below signed petitioners is that our concerns be heard, acted upon, and revisited after 1 year of project completion or as deemed necessary. If initial heavy planting of desert trees, plants, and berms does not mitigate the noise and soften lights to an acceptable level, we ask that future design wall improvements be evaluated and the impacted Los Portones homeowners be included in future decisions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. This matter will be added to the petition item 12 part of our agenda. I will now move to another request for public comment. This one is by telephone.
Mayor Ortega and members of the City Council, this is Shane Stone with the City Manager's Office. We have Mary Brockman on the line. Ms. Brockman, please press *6 on your device and begin your public comment.
Okay, I guess I'm here now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Mary Brockman. I live in Los Bertones. I live at 23635 North 75th Place, a 24-year Scottsdale resident, and directly across from Miller Road. And I just wanted to give a brief refreshment to anybody that hasn't, I'm sure you don't look at every new road every day, of what really is being planned there. And we have, it's a 0.6 mile area from Pinnacle Peak to the new bridge, 4 traffic lanes, intermittent medians, bike lanes both sides, sidewalks both sides, and now this multi-purpose trail both sides. The east side already has a trail, so putting one on the west side is an addition. Supposedly the trail is for wheelchairs, horses, and dirt bikes. Now, for we that have lived there a long time, the number of horses we have seen in the last 20 plus years is probably can be counted on one hand. And if you're pushing a wheelchair or driving a wheelchair, you're going to be on the sidewalk. So we wonder about that. We have discussed the 8-foot trail numerous times with the city, and it seems really important to them to have it. Now the latest maps, what Debbie was talking to you about, is the trail has basically taken away that could be available property to allow space to put plants or eventually whatever we might need for noise control. Now, according to the city video in May, the short-term volume of traffic is about 6,000 cars. And in the long term, 22,000 per day. Now that sounds like quite a bit of noise. So basically, I would like to support Debbie and be sure that people are, that the trail can be revisited for why is it really there? And it really is going to disturb the people because we can't get, anything to help with the noise problem. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment. So therefore, I now close public comment. At this point, we are looking at the consent agenda items. Items 1 through 6. I have not received any requests or comments on any of those items, but I will draw your attention to the screen, which actually depicts item number 2 on our consent agenda, which has to do with the land use agreement with Salt River Project that culminated in the picture that we often exhibit. So there is no public comment on any item, and therefore I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda items.
Move to accept.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 6. Any discussion? Thank you. Please register your vote. Okay. Unanimous. We will now move to the regular agenda. Item number 6, which is the Bartlett Dam modification feasibility study. Memorandum of understanding. Our presenter is Brian Biesmeyer with the Water Resources. He's the executive director, as well as Gretchen Baumgartner, who is with the water policy manager. So thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, I think in light of all the hard stories on water and shortage on the Colorado River Basin. I have a good news story that I have tonight to present to council. So I think that's a little different in all the stories we've been seeing. And this involves the SRP system. So the Salt River Project system, a little overview, involves both the Verde and the Salt Rivers. And we get about 20% of our water allocation, surface water allocation from the Salt River Project. So what is this about? This is about a sedimentation issue on the Verde River. So during the last year, the Bureau of Reclamation undertook a federal appraisal study to evaluate sedimentation that was occurring on the Verde River system, particularly at Horseshoe Dam. On the right is kind of schematic of the dams on the Verde and Salt Rivers. On the upper part of that diagram, you can see Horseshoe and Bartlett, which are on the Verde. And then you can see on the lower and the right-hand side, the Salt River with Roosevelt Lake, Apache Lake, Canyon Lake, and Saguaro Lake. The issue at hand is sedimentation in Horseshoe, and it's accumulated about 45,000 acre feet of sedimentation that's displaced storage capacity in Horseshoe Reservoir. And with that, obviously, that's storage capacity that everybody in the SRP system can use. Additionally, as you can see, the storage capacity in the Salt River is tremendously more than the Verde River. The Verde River, although it makes up about 40% of the flows of the combined SRP system, it has only 7% of the storage. So any decrease in storage on the Verde River is significant. So the appraisal study looked at no action, sediment removal from Horseshoe, or possibly Bartlett Dam modification, the raising of Bartlett Dam, either 62 feet or 97 feet. Well, the first one with no action obviously doesn't address the sedimentation. That's going to continue to occur. It's going to continue to displace storage capacity on the Verde River. Sediment removal is also problematic. It's costly, and the amount of sediment is just amazing. If they would take that sediment out of Horseshoe Lake, it represents 50 foot deep for 2 square miles. So there's just no place to put all that sediment. So the other two possible approaches were for Bartlett Dam, raising 62 or 97 feet. Those have the advantage of restoring that lost capacity, and then they allows Horseshoe to be operated as a sediment control basin. So at the right, you can see the dam and the size of the lake, should it be raised to 97 feet. And then the little dashed line shows the extent of the reservoir, should it be raised to 62 feet, and the size of the reservoir there. Again, as I mentioned, it would use Horseshoe Dam as a sedimentation facility. That would also be able to do some environmental work to this is kind of a mitigation for the additional space that's being taken up with the Bartlett Reservoir. And again, as I mentioned, it would allow for that displacement to occur with the additional reservoir space in Bartlett Dam. And it would potentially create new conservation storage space. And I'm going to go back, if I may, see if I can get this to this diagram, and you can see Roosevelt Dam. So in this point, I'd like to point out Roosevelt Dam. And in the 1990s, the city of Scottsdale participated with SRP in the actual raising of Roosevelt Dam. And that got us what's called new conservation space. And as a result, when Roosevelt Dam fills up, which is not all the time, but it's done it twice in the last 15 years, we get over 20,000 acre feet of water in a kind of like a bank account that we get with SRP that we can then draw down on. And so when we talk about conservation space with Bartlett, we're talking about the same concept. Let me move move on forward. So we are actually at the appraisal study and the end of the appraisal study cycle. The next step is a feasibility study and a cost share agreement. And so the federal government will pay 50% of the feasibility study for Bartlett Dam. SRP and partners will pay for the other part of the feasibility study. And so this is SRP's request for partners in this feasibility study. But it does get us in on the ground floor for the possibility of additional water storage space in the SRP system. The feasibility study would take between 2 and 4 years. So this is a long time frame, and building or modifying a dam takes a long time as well. So most likely it's 10 years plus out before this could come to fruition, or even if it will come to fruition, because it's going to take a finding of feasibility for the raising of the dam, and then it's going to take congressional authorization, and then 5 or 10 years to build the dam. It's not immediate, but in a world where we're talking about cutbacks of water supplies, this is, in my view, a positive event, and we're asking council tonight to adopt resolution 12232 approving a contract and a memorandum of understanding with the Salt River Valley Users Association.
Thank you very much. I'm looking to see if there's any public comment on this item. There is none. Therefore, I will close public comment. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, at this, Councilman Durham, Member Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. This doesn't solve the sedimentation problem in Horseshoe, does it? But it merely offsets that with additional capacity behind Bartlett Dam.
That's correct, but it will allow that sedimentation to continue to occur and not displace the water, because it would operate it just as that sedimentation control.
Right. You expect that there'd be significant environmental issues with this request? That I assume that would be part of the process, especially before Congress.
That'll be part of the process. Feasibility study will take into account those actions. Again, part of that, it will be looking at Horseshoe Dam and what can be offered as mitigation to Bartlett Dam and the raising of the lake level at Bartlett.
Right. Thank you.
Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the cost to the city for doing this. I noticed in the report, it says for years 22 through 25 would be a total of 300,000 over a 4-year period. I assume that's a funding from the city to do this.
That's the city's funding, or our estimate of the city's funding.
Okay. Do you anticipate that to go on beyond that time frame?
I think there's a possibility that it could increase to 400,000, but I don't anticipate more than that.
Okay, thank you.
I do recall, because I grew up in Globe and I watched Roosevelt Dam be raised. It was raised by 70 feet. So it was 280 feet and it was raised to 350 feet. And it was fortified with concrete. Originally it was stone, largest stone bridge. But what it did is it increased the capacity by 20%. So otherwise, if it gets filled up, it has to be released and then it's water over the bridge, right? And we can't control it as well. So with that comment, I will move to adopt resolution number 12232, approving contract number 2021-126, City of Scottsdale, memorandum of understanding between the city and the Salt River Project Users Association and Salt River Project Agricultural Improvement and Power District, SRP, and other participating entities and support the Bartlett Dam modification feasibility study.
I second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Passed unanimously. Moving on to item number 8. Item number 8 involves the sewer line extension program changes. And once again, our Director of Water Resources, Brian Beismeyer, will handle the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And yes, I am here again. Wait for that presentation to come up. This, as you recall, this is a continuation of our July 1st discussion on the sewer line extension program. And we've had previous discussions not only on July 1st, but going back to October 2019. And just as a reminder, the sewer line extension is an extension of a sewer line to serve additional properties. And in this case, it's in the residential context. It's done to allow a homeowner or developer of single family home to extend that sewer to serve that property. We do it as a result of the general plan guidance to recognize the value of water and wastewater as a resource, to make sure that new service delivery costs are borne by those desiring the service, and to recognize sewer systems, the use of sewer systems instead of private septic systems. And real quickly, on July 1st, as you recall, we had 2 items before council. One was the adoption of Ordinance 4507. The second one was discussion of the rate setting process for an aquifer protection fee. It seemed that council did have a general agreement on the first, but not the second of those 2 items. So for this presentation, the ask is only for adoption of Ordinance 4507, authorizing changes to the city code. I'll go over those code changes here. Those were those low cost, what we called low cost options for residential septic to sewer conversion. Low cost in that they were low or no cost to the sewer fund, not claiming there were no cost to the people extending those lines. This is payment over, the first one was payment over time to allow a customer to pay over time. It would require the customer to take a lien on their property for security for the city, and then a down payment in 5 years to pay with the administrative charge. The second is an interest reduction from what we currently charge now is a 1%, as 1% prime plus 1%, sorry. And then we change that to our latest water or sewer bond rate. I've talked about those quite often, so I'm not sure I want to really go over any of those issues, but I'm here to answer any questions on those issues. Again, the low cost items are really not involving the developer. So the developer is going to continue to do his work. It's for those residents that are on that line as it extends and have the obligation to connect should their septic fail. And in those cases, we'd be able to offer a lower interest rate and payment over time.
Thank you. At this point, I would open for public comment on item number 8. Hearing none, seeing none, I will close public comment. Are there any questions of council? And seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adopt the ordinance. Please read it formally.
I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 4507, authorizing changes in the city code for sewer line extensions, extension participation, and line payback agreements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We have a discussion. Councilman Littlefield.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Biesmeyer, I just have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I basically like the idea of going on sewer. I think it's a better option than a septic tank. But we have a lot of people who've been here a long time that still have their septic tanks and that do take care of them. Some people don't, some people do. What happens with the septic tank fails and people can't afford to go on the sewer? They just plain don't have the money. They've lost their jobs or something. I don't want to be in a position where we cause people to lose their homes. I guess that's really what my concern is. Does this then go on as a lien against the house? Should they ever want to sell it, or how does? it work?
The payback agreement is not technically a lien, but it is a requirement to connect to the sewer to make those payments. Again, and that part of this would be to allow folks to pay over time, to understand that. But it wouldn't be, so if they can repair their sewer, two things would happen. If they're within if they have a sewer line in front of their house and their septic fails, then we require them to connect.
Okay.
If that sewer line is not in front of their house, then that's a whole separate deal. They can put a new septic system in and stuff, but that sewer line is in front of your house, then they would be required to connect. But if they could repair that sewer, they could repair the sewer.
You
So-
mean the septic?
I'm sorry, septic.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry. Too many S words. Yes.
All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. I see no further discussion requests. Please register your vote. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much. The next agenda item is item number 9, which deals with temporary housing. Greg Bestian will make the presentation as the Human Service Department Director. Great to see you again, Greg.
Mayor Lane, council members, thank you for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm here to give you just some insight into some of the work that we've been doing recently with our East Valley Partnership Group, and maybe just to give you a little tiny synopsis of what we've been doing with our homeless program. So we'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. So, I've come to you before and talked about what are the various faces of homelessness that we see, right? I think I mentioned that my parents came to me homeless several years ago with no place to go, and I was lucky enough to have the space to be able to accommodate them for a good number of years, and I was very happy to pay that back. But it can be all of these categories that you see here. That's seniors that are chronically homeless, which means you've been homeless for longer than a year, a period of a year, or over a 4-year period, you've been in and out of homelessness at least 4 times. So there are different definitions for what we consider chronically homeless. We certainly know that we're going to be facing recently evicted individuals, which again can include all of these populations that you see represented here, including seriously mentally ill individuals. So with the coming eviction moratorium being lifted, we know that we're going to be challenged. And this cute picture that you see here is our Phoenix rescue mission with one of our folks that we helped out actually into some shelter services. And she was experiencing street homelessness here in Scottsdale. So next slide, please. All right. So some of the models that we could look at would be, first of all, there are emergency shelters. We have been very generous in what we've given to CAS, which is the Human Services Campus, and the shelter that provides hundreds of beds overnight for folks in Phoenix. You could look at bridge models, which is really very much what we did at our temporary hotel shelter program at the Roadway Inn. That's a great example of providing a facility where you can stabilize people with safety, with food, with shelter. And when you do that, you open their minds to seeking new ways, new opportunities to perhaps move out of their homeless situation. And so we graduated 40 individuals into various types of shelter. And I know you've heard these stats before. I think I did it at your summer retreat. But just to let you know that those are very successful programs. You also have non-congregate housing, so that could be something very similar to the temporary hotel shelter. You could also look at apartments, folks that get permanent supportive housing vouchers. They transition into what we call non-congregate housing. And then those two programs I just mentioned, they provide some financial support along with wraparound services and support services like we had at our hotel shelter program through community bridges. So we know that you don't just put someone in housing and then expect them to thrive when it's been long time that maybe they haven't done that. And so it takes time to get them regulated in their thought process. And that's one of the things that the wraparound services provide, intensive case management. We also have the substance abuse and behavioral health programs that CBI and Phoenix Rescue Mission both operate as nonprofits, and we've certainly gotten folks into those treatment programs when they've needed them. This is a huge population on the streets, as you well know. And so it's very important that we ramp up as many of those behavioral health services as we can. The 202 properties, we have a couple in our southern region of Scottsdale. And what that is similar to what we do in our HCV Housing Choice Voucher Program. That provides housing for folks that only have to pay 1/3 of the income that they get. A lot of our folks are on that $740 a month income. And so getting them into something that they're only using 1/3 of their income, because remember, they're on medications, remember they have other needs, that kind of thing. So we have wait lists though of a few years at those 202 properties. So and then we have, of course, our housing choice voucher programs, our emergency housing voucher program, which is part of the HCV. And then we have some ideas about mixed use developments where you would mix different folks under one particular possible facility. Next slide. So the current partners that we have that are providing boots on the ground, Phoenix Rescue Mission, they've done an amazing job of doing with 3 street navigators. They get out and actually they intercept the folks that are experiencing homelessness chronically on our streets. And it takes several times of making contact with them before what we call an engagement. An engagement means sort of like a marriage. An engagement means that, you know, you're willing to talk with me now. You're willing to talk about options for alternatives to housing and that kind of thing. But you have to trust me, just like in a marriage, right? You have to build trust with these individuals. And without trust, you don't have respect. So it's a long process, but we do it. We take steps forward, we take steps backward. But Phoenix Rescue keeps going back. Community Bridges provided the wraparound services at the temporary hotel shelter program, and they also provide the wraparound services at our new faces that you see referenced here on the slide. They also provide wraparound services and intensive case management at our 2 day relief centers, and that is the New Faces partnership with those 2 churches. Elaine provides emergency transportation to folks that need to get to medical appointments, things like that. And so, and then we have From the Ground Up, which is a consulting firm that we're using to help us with conversations in the East Valley. Next slide. And then funding sources, I'll just quickly go through these. We have the CARES funds that you have graciously allowed me to use for the programs that I just previously referenced. And then we have our CDBG HUD funds that have also allowed us to provide the similar type of programming in the community. We do get money from our tribal communities every year, and that's generous and valued to our human services programs that we do. And then of course, the general funds, that would be my salary, that would be social workers at the senior centers. Next slide. And then proposed funding streams would be perhaps general contingent, City of Scottsdale general contingency funds. We are in, talks and conversations with the county, Tempe, Mesa, and looking at maybe how we would all make a equal contribution to a program. And then we certainly have our NGOs, private and contributions that are a big source. Next slide. So the timeline, it would depend. If it's a existing structure, it would be shorter than this, but for something long-term, we're looking at more like 4 years, depending on the model that was chosen by you. Next slide. I open that up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the background information. At this point, I would open Public comment. I see one in person, Barney Gonzalez.
Thank you, Council. Mayor Ortega. I want to thank the council for taking on these hard looks. It's time that we did these type of structures. We have kicked the can down the road far too long. So now is the time to do something and do something positive towards the end of homelessness in our area. We are always interested in preserving and helping our citizens, stakeholders, and everybody else concerned with the city. It is to our benefit, to all our benefits, that we address this situation and cure the situation as much as we can. It's going to be a long process. It's not a top priority for anybody. However, these people can't wait. So the importance of this type of program and your ability to tackle this on at this time period shows bravery and the ability to solve problems that the city faces. Thank you.
Thank you. Therefore, I close public comment. We have discussion from Councilwoman Whitehead.
I just want to thank the mayor and Greg and all the staff that's participated in this. The idea of working across borders, having Tempe, Mesa, the county, I just think this is an exciting proposal. I think we have to tackle the root cause. We have to prevent people from ever falling into homelessness by having enough housing. And that's an issue that's also multi-pronged. And I just commend the mayor and staff for coming up with something that we can move forward, and that it is a partnership among many government agencies. So I'm enthusiastic.
Thank you. I will comment a bit. When we hosted this concept and this group, I invited the housing director of the state of Arizona. I invited the Board of Supervisor, Jack Sellers, and invited the Mayor of Tempe, the Mayor of Mesa, and one of the directors of the Valleywise County Health Services. And everyone showed up on July 30th and brought their senior staff. And we had a full discussion about how we could be effective, more effective, working together, finding common ground. We know we have homeless in every municipality, and we know that whether in our parks, in our business doorways, in our parking garage, and with the hardships of COVID magnifying those situations, that everyone step forward and express a consensus to be willing to work as a group and create a new framework to look at a joint project or whatever may evolve. We all agreed that we would go back to our specific entities, that is this chamber, as well as action in Mesa, Tempe, and at the Board of Supervisor level. Tom Simplot, who's the Arizona Director of Housing in Arizona, state of Arizona, attended, and he expressed that certainly funds are available, either rescue funds or CARES funds in this category. What we're talking about and what the subject was, the homeless portion, not the permanent housing portion. I think the background that Greg has provided shows how some allied services work. However, the purpose of this discussion and my presentation today as well is that I will be asking for a motion to direct the staff to continue this conversation because upper staff, senior staff has been in contact with our common goals through these different entities. And this is only the first step. Greg was able to look at some specifics of what we deliver here. However, we believe that if we can jointly work together, we'll have a new model that isn't just about containment and then letting people out on the sidewalk after or during the day. It's a model of engagement where people might find a part-time job, where people may find classes accessible in close proximity, and then some wraparound services. All of this also was looked at as a reciprocal kind of relationship. Some models are working. This could be our unique East Valley model that we're looking for. The reality is that we do have funds available, and Mr. Simplot, Director Simplot mentioned that funds are available, federal funds, for this purpose. So we may be able to, corral certainly sharp minds in our different jurisdictions and be able to establish a framework that would involve the legal staffs. It would involve let's call it an umbrella shell at this point. And those goals will be in keeping in mind that we do want a neutral site that's so-called not in your backyard, and that would satisfy transportation, job availability, part-time job and whatever, education, trade school or whatever, and of course the wraparound services as people get on their feet. So with that background, we're going to continue the discussion. I'll go next to Vice Mayor Janik and then Councilmember Milhaven.
Well, first of all, I think this is a bold move forward. And I want to thank everybody on staff and council who has taken that brave step to move forward on this. It is a problem. It's not going to get any better. And I think this is a very novel and progressive model that I think has a very strong chance of success. I also know that this is the way forward that MAG keeps proposing, that we work together with other communities, because working with the other communities makes it much easier to solve the problem. I would hope that staff will continue the work on this. And I cannot say enough about Greg, who has been the leader, and the kindness and the compassion that he shows all these individuals. And the success rate you have, I think, is directly related to your involvement in your care for these individuals. So I want to thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Next, we have Council Member Milhaven and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start my remarks with a little bit of context because we get emails from citizens about the homeless in Scottsdale. And folks may not be aware that the courts ruled that folks have a First Amendment right to use public spaces. And so where folks may remember the old no loitering ordinances and things like that, the court ruling no longer allows us to have ordinances like that. So the toolkit we may have had before to address homelessness in our community doesn't provide us with that option. And so we really need to find other ways to help address that problem. So we had the court order that said for folks have their First Amendment rights. And then Tempe got a lot more aggressive in trying to address their homeless problem. And so the homeless decided maybe Scottsdale was a better place to be than Tempe. And so that also aggravates our problem. I do want to echo Vice Mayor Janik's praise of Greg and his team. Folks may not realize we have an amazing team who's got amazing resources. Greg shared some of that with us earlier who do a great job. And so if you see homeless in your area and you're concerned, please contact the city. If Greg's team hasn't already been in touch with them, they will reach out and see how they can provide support and services. So that's a little bit of context. To the immediate issue at hand, I'm very concerned that the very last slide is a picture of a high-rise homeless shelter. And I think people need to understand that the mayor's conversations around this partnership and this program have included consideration of putting this high-rise homeless shelter in South Scottsdale, or potentially in the county island not far from our southern border. I think our responsibility as council members is to protect our quality of life, to keep property values strong, to keep taxes low. And I don't think that citing a homeless shelter in Scottsdale is consistent with our responsibility to our community. I think we'd have to go pretty far to find anybody in Scottsdale who thinks that's a good idea. While we have a homeless issue in Scottsdale that we need to replace, I think some of the other East Valley communities have a bigger problem than we have. And I'm not sure we want to build a warehouse for the other communities to send their homeless to Scottsdale. It's ironic that we're discussing building a high-rise homeless shelter when the conversation in town suggests there's hesitancy to build luxury apartments. So that contradiction is quite mind-numbing. So I am certainly interested in community collaboration and regional participation. And if Mr. Bestion's team needs to add staff, we need to invest in additional resources, I am all for that conversation and that collaboration. But I could in no way ever support building a homeless shelter in Scottsdale or anywhere near its southern border. Thank you.
I will respond to your comments because you are incorrect. I did not put this graphic. The staff did. It was not presented to any of the partners that are trying to address the needs of, again, our business people, our parks, and as you said, if you have a problem with homeless people, you just call Greg. That's an incorrect, and you seem to be stuck on H's there. Homeless high-rise is a construction that you have just made on your own. To be fully aware, you are also the council person that voted against affordable housing when the council, yes, you did, 6-1, you voted against that, and we put it in the budget anyway. At this point, this is a conceptual. The purpose of this discussion is when you have more cooperation and more discussion and less distortion, or putting down any waving that red flag of homeless high-rise, which is really totally ludicrous. This came out about 5 days ago as a drawing, and you are completely off base, and we will move to other people that want to comment. So I will not let that stand. You can oppose what is on the table. What is on the table is not a final project. It is a collaboration and a partnership among people that know that many of their friends or even business people have lost their homes recently with COVID. There are homeless veterans who have lost their way, and there are many needs that can be understood and better addressed with the funds available. So the characterization is consistent with your voting against affordable housing, and I will leave it at that and move on to comments from others. And next comment is Councilwoman Littlefield, and then Councilmember Durham.
Thank you, Mayor. When the mayor presented this idea to me, I was very excited about it. We have tried many, many different ways to help people who are homeless, who have problems, and who cannot find ways to help themselves. And we have been moderately successful. I give Mr. Bestian his credit where credit is due, but we have a long way to go. These are not people who don't want to get better. These are not people who do not want to find their way. All they need is a little help. And when I came across this idea with the mayor of a collaboration, not just with the city of Scottsdale, but with other mayors in other cities that touch us, and that we can work together uniformly to find solutions that actually work, I think this has more possibilities of success than anything we've tried yet. So I am very excited about looking at this. When we have other city mayors who come to Scottsdale and say, look, we can work together, we can find solutions, and we can do it without harming the cities and without harming our citizens, but with helping these people who are trying to get on their feet. I think that's a real positive attitude. With the last year and all the issues that we've had to face with COVID and everything else, it's not been a normal time for pretty much everybody. And so I am very interested in continuing this conversation with the other cities, with the other mayors, through looking for a possible collaboration of participants to work together to find real workable solutions, to work with our sister cities, and all of this related to homelessness. I am a very conservative person, okay? I'm probably one of the most conservatives the city has ever put up here. But that doesn't mean that we should not be willing to extend our hand and help those who need it. That's part of our American way. That's who we are, and it's who we've always been as Americans. These people want help. We should be able to help them. It would not involve, from what I've heard and from what I've had people talk to me about, a homeless shelter, multi-stories high, being built in Scottsdale. That is not happening, and I would not be for that. This would be in an unincorporated area near all of the involved cities that are going to be working together to find solutions. And that way, it's a joint effort. So they're not going to be going to Tempe. Tempe's going to say, we're shutting our doors, we're not helping you. So then they go to Peoria, and Peoria says, goodbye, we're not interested. And then they go to Scottsdale. No, this is for everybody. And we're going to be collaborating on similar solutions to these problems and hopefully find solutions. But those who want it, if they don't want it, they can leave. They're not going to be held against their will. And we certainly would not be in a position where we would be permanently, forever and a day, having a new underclass of people dependent upon us. This is to help people get on their feet, to help them find their way, to find solutions to their issues with a roof over their head and a feeling of safety for themselves and their families while they do it. I think it is worth trying. It's a new solution. It's an empathetic solution that might have a possibility of succeeding. There are a lot of organizations out there that work in this area. We could collaborate with them too, bring them in, work with them. And I think it's worth a try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least we can say we gave it our best. We tried our best to make it help and to make people feel like they were worthwhile and that we helped them and that we cared about them. Thank you.
Councilmember Durham and then Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we aware of any precedents where anything like this has been used in either other parts of the state or other parts of the country where, I think the general idea of bringing all these services together in a collaborative way obviously has the potential to save a lot of money and provide these services in a more effective way.
And at this point, I will revert to Mr. Thompson, who has some experience in this area.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I think if we look around the country, there are some models out there. Puget Sound region in Seattle, we brought all the services together and then distributed them throughout the entire county. We shared HUD funds, we shared all the various CDBG and others and brought it together and dispersed it. Worked well, but there are challenges. Again, depending on where you locate them and so forth. Here in the West Valley, out by Glendale, there's now one that is moving forward on a regional basis to congregate services together in that area. I think the discussions that we've had today with the neighboring jurisdictions to look at regional type services being congregated together, that they're close and nearby, nothing of which has been discussed within our confines of Scottsdale, but outside. Recent discussions at staff level following the first meeting that occurred amongst the mayors was even maybe further south than where the unincorporated area has been discussed at the original discussion. So again, it continues to morph. Some concerns by the other jurisdictions of location, but we think that it's a very positive opportunity for us to really work regionally to pull funds together and to provide services and more of a location that they all go to. Otherwise, what you do is scatter it out. What we know historically is you tend to move those populations. So depending on where those services are available, depending on what actions you take, depending if you put barriers to maybe their success in certain areas and where opportunity lies. And so you tend to move them around. And so if you have a cohesive place that everybody can agree upon and you bring them together, you have much greater success. So I think there's many models. Those are the two that I'm familiar with currently. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Durham, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Caputi and then Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg. I think your department's doing a great job. We've had a lot of conversations. I think this is a wonderful idea in theory, as you and I've discussed. And of course, I don't think there's anyone on this dais that wouldn't want to see us cure the homeless problem. I'd love to see us do that. I'm not quite sure I have the solution. I think this is a really good idea. It seems unbelievably vague, and there'd be so many things that we would need to talk about. I know I've spoken with some of the folks in the fire department and the police department, and they've expressed that idea that's been brought up here before today, that even the city manager just mentioned it. You've got populations that are just moving, right? So Tempe decides they're going to crack down, and then it becomes Scottsdale's problem. And so while I love this idea that everyone would collaborate, I've spoken with some folks in the different cities and Valley Wise Health, and I just, again, rah in the beginning, but I'd want to have way more conversations and see how this might actually work. We're talking about kind of what it looks like. We're way too far upstream, I guess, to be able to picture it. I'm sure that would have to be part of the conversation as well. Where is it going to be located? There's always that problem. If you build it, they will come. And I don't think we want to be warehousing humans. I think we want to be making sure that we would provide all the ancillary services. You're going to bring a homeless population into our city or close to it, and then you're going to have all those other services that will be required, right? Because homeless populations are different. They're going to have mental health needs. They're going to have medical health needs. There will be a whole other layer of things that we're going to need to provide. We can't just put humans in a place and then say, yay. And then, of course, there's funding issues, right? So CARES Act money is one time. We would need a dedicated source of funding on a regular basis, and we'd need to be able to see that going out, not just a Band-Aid, or else we're going to have even more problems. So I'm very happy to have further conversation. I just think that we're way in the beginning of this conversation. The other problem I'm having with this is we keep doing things on this council that get us away from having more affordable housing in our community. And so we're just
sort of kicking the can. We're creating the situation and then and then we're looking at the other side of that, right? So don't provide any affordable housing, but then make sure that we can house the homeless. That feels a little odd to me. I think the solution needs to be more of a continuum in a pipeline rather than just, again, using that term, warehousing humans. Based on the emails that I get all day long, I don't know how the rest of my colleagues feel, but I see the hate mails all day long about apartments and we don't want those people here and we don't want to put more people in Scottsdale and God forbid we have more people here. So as like Councilwoman Milhaven, I don't think anyone's trying to appear insensitive, but if we are listening to residents, I'm not hearing that people want more population and I'm certainly not hearing that they want more lower income population in Scottsdale. Again, that's just me. I have a hard time understanding how we would get community support for bringing in a large homeless population in or near our city. But I am perfectly happy to have more conversation and I would love to be the person that solves the homeless problem. I could think of nothing better, but I defer to the professionals.
Councilwoman Whitehead and then Councilmember Milhaven, and I will have remarks.
Okay, so if Councilwoman Milhaven's correct, we're going to have a communication. We're going to have to sit down and talk with our community about that, and we don't do anything that our community, absolutely objects to. But I think a lot has changed over the last, certainly since 2020. There's a couple recognitions. There's the recognition that homeless people are middle-class people who had one medical disease or one incident of bad luck. And there's the recognition that seniors and young people, we're seeing a spike in those types of homelessness. And there's the recognition, the very real recognition that even if you're a heartless person, the most financially sensible thing you can do is catch people before they become permanently homeless. That is where the cost is, not providing nonprofits access to homeless people in a single center. That is pennies on the dollar. You always want to prevent. Prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say. Then I also want to address, everybody's very complimentary of you, and I am as well, that because of some of Greg's past programs, we have a track record to present to our community. Roadway Inn, when Greg set that up for homeless people, number one, no hotel wanted the business, really. It's summer during COVID. Roadway Inn raised their hand. They got a great deal. The city got a great deal. The city provided, I think, police at the hotel and quickly found out, well, we don't need police. So there might be a crime problem, but it wasn't with the homeless people staying at Roadway Inn. And Greg had tremendous success. So we turned a homeless population into a not homeless population. And again, this is cost saving to the heartless taxpayer who only cares about money. Then there's the issue of that. Well, I visited a senior living center in Mesa, and it's an interesting situation. It is a beautiful luxury complex. It is gorgeous. And of course, people were worried, and there's, low-income seniors. Unfortunately, it was so successful that it raised the property values in the area, making making it more expensive for the next low-income project. So low-income and homeless centers don't have to bring crime, but they do have to be well managed, and so it's a matter of management. I think we got to end this pitting city against city. So this idea of working with the state, the county, and the cities that are all impacted is awesome. But I do have some recommendations I just want to mention. I always prefer an existing structure, although that one in Mesa is gorgeous. That was a new facility. Existing structures are cheaper, and yeah, that high rise was a bad picture to throw in there. I also would like staff to make to really come back to us and give us direction. This idea of temporary housing, as you know, I just dealt with this gentleman who ended up, we found housing for him for 2 nights or 1 night, but what does that mean, temporary versus permanent? Because I want to make sure that people like the Roadway Inn are there long enough to get the jobs and to get the permanent housing. So I want to know, what does temporary housing mean? And I just also want to point out that, you know, as a volunteer at the Granite Reef Senior Center, we're just seeing a huge increase. So we have people that come and pick up 10 bags of food. And for others in their apartment complex, those same people are now picking up 3 bags of food because the 7 others that they used to pick up food for have been tossed out. So we have a problem. And it's with seniors and it's with others as well. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Everyone has spoken. Back to Councilmember Milhaven and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you. I just want to clarify. So there's a difference between affordable workforce housing and homelessness, right? So when we talk about affordable workforce housing, it's about providing enough variety of housing options and price points so the people who work and serve those of us who live here in Scottsdale can have a decent place to live. So homelessness versus workforce housing are 2 very different issues. I just want to clarify that I did not vote to put money in the budget for affordable housing discussion because there was no clarity on how the money would be spent or where it was going to come from. I'd also like to point out that I was the one that made the motion as a mayor and council item to establish a community conversation about ways that we could improve affordable workforce housing. So I just wanted to set the record straight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Littlefield, and then I will make a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say a couple of things and just let people think about it a little bit. This project may not work. It's kind of a pie in the sky. Hopefully, we're going to try it and see if we can make it happen. But I'd like to ask people, who do you think the homeless are in general? They're us. They're people. They're Americans. There are a lot of ex-military who have some problems, came back wounded, either physically or mentally, many different ways. There are people who have lost their jobs because of COVID. Businesses have collapsed. There are people who can't get work right now because we have everything, the lower job salaries are closing up. They're going away because everything's going online. You can order your groceries in and pick them up at the store and you don't have to be there to get them checked out. You know, all of this kind of stuff. So the society itself is changing, and it's changing in ways that are hurting some of our people who had these jobs. Now the jobs aren't available. You know, some of them want to go to school. How are they going to do that when they don't have money to pay for housing in order to go to school and spend their time getting an education? How are they going to feed their kids when they can't get a job? These are kinds of people, you know, they're not scum. They're people who have had really, really hard issues, hard problems in the last few years, especially. And if we can help them get a hand up, get them back on their feet and make them feel like, okay, I have a roof over my head and I can concentrate on getting myself together and getting my family back together, that's a real win-win for us. Now, I'm not saying we're going to build apartment complexes for the homeless in Scottsdale. I would not be for that. And I don't think any other council in the valley would be for that particularly either. But I think working together jointly, uniformly, with the same focus, going in the same direction as the others, we can combine our knowledge, we can combine our experience, and maybe it will help us to move forward with this issue and get a handle on it. That's what I'm willing to try, because I think it's worthwhile trying. If it doesn't work, we're not out anything except time, effort, and a few tears. You know, I think we need to give it a shot. With all the other cities that are looking at this, you know, this is a step forward that hasn't happened yet before in the Valley, and I think it's worth time. It's worth doing. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Caputi, once again.
I absolutely, again, I'm in agreement with moving forward on this idea, but I just want people to consider the fact that we are going to help the homeless population, again, which I agree is people that you would least likely consider. And we, of course, need to take care of our homeless population. But the goal will be to get them out of homelessness, right, and into permanent shelter. And so we have a city that we are discouraging diversity of housing. And so we're going to get people out of that homeless situation. And then where are we putting them? In a large single-family lot in Scottsdale? All I'm saying is I would like the conversation to have more of a, I think we need to think about this holistically. There needs to be a pipeline of housing because we're going to solve the homeless problem and then we're going to ship the newly homed folks into other communities. Or like, I just think as a community, we actually need to look at the whole pipeline, not just one side and the other side. But yes, absolutely, I'm going to agree with the motion that's about to be made to continue the conversation. I just want to make sure we think about all of the parts of this conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Everyone has spoken. I want to be very clear that I can understand the skepticism that might occur. We know that there is a need, and I also respond to emails from business people saying, please help us, please do something, please act. We are tax-paying businesses and let's work together on something. We all want successful outcomes. The fact is that, well, for 11 or 12 years that some people have been on council, they have not done anything. And I can understand the homelessness not being addressed for almost a dozen years. When we have the opportunity, because the definition of affordable housing, by the way, which is broad, it involves emergency housing, temporary housing, and it's a category. One can check that later and find that out as this group continues in the study of the discussion. The idea of workforce housing and apartments at market rates or otherwise is another topic. It's off topic for what was discussed. What I want to say is how encouraging it can be when we can have the chairman of the Board of Supervisors sitting next to me saying, rarely, and if anything is proposed within his district, and it may involve county property or just going to him for advice, he will always seek the approval of the adjoining mayor. And to hear him say, we've got 3 mayors in that district that want to say, we can bring a better solution, and to say that that kind of buy-in is there, and the head of housing, which handles many bundles of funds, right? And we can explore all of those levels, and we can move together because there has been a big catastrophe in the economy and hitting people at various times. The agendized item, I will now move that to direct the city manager and the city attorney and other resources of staff who are very knowledgeable to speak with counterparts, that this council would direct that our city manager and charters communicate among themselves and then with the other parties so that we can try to look at a construction or framework, which would still have to come back to council, which would be encompassing the parties. We may be different from the state, county, and city level, but we have the same problem and we have the same need to meet the human need. And so I would move that we move forward in that direction and report back as appropriate.
I second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We have discussion from Councilmember Milhaven.
Would the mayor entertain a friendly amendment in order to identify that we are not interested in building or creating any physical center to house or serve the homeless?
Sir, excuse me, madam, you are, no, I'm not entertaining a friendly motion of a hypothetical.
Thank you.
We are talking about a general framework at this stage. Anything, any actual bricks and mortar would come back in a combined entity. Any other discussion? We have a motion and we have a second. Your light is still on, Ms. Milhaven. Thank you. Please vote. Thank you. The motion passed 6-1, Councilmember Milhaven dissenting. Next, we will go to item number 10. We are here to discuss the public safety plan ordinance and receive the overview from our illustrious Chief Jeffrey Walters. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. I'm very pleased to be with you today. This is an ordinance that is near and dear to my heart. Almost exactly 8 years ago this month, my counterpart, Louis Santaella, and I, and then Mayor's Assistant JP Twist actually did a lot of work in putting together the public safety plan ordinance that went before council. Councilmember Milhaven was on at that time, and Councilwoman Littlefield's husband, Bob, was on council at that time when we passed that pretty groundbreaking legislation for us. And so I want to thank them for that. And really what we're going to talk about here briefly as we go through this is some changes and amendments we'd like to make for your review and discussion, some questions, and then some direction to staff to move forward with potentially some outreach to the public for these changes. So I'm excited to share them with you. It really has been a great 8 years with the public safety plan ordinance and the level of increased safety that has brought to the downtown. I know I've shared with you information lately that makes you question that, but we can kind of get into some of that as we move along. So I want to give you a little bit of background in terms of how we came to be where we are today and where we want to go with this along with the proposed updates. So a little bit of background and how we got here. On January 27th, 2013, Tyrese Thompson, who was a civilian security officer at Martini Ranch, was stabbed out in front of the club and later died of his wounds. That really prompted a lot of discussion, both in the PD and at the city level, related to the amount of violence that we were seeing in clubs at that time, and in particular, inside the clubs, which is really what we wanted to work on. January 28th of that same year in 2013, folks from the mayor's office, city attorney's office, police department, fire department, code enforcement and planning, we kind of all got together to discuss what are best practices. In fact, Luis and I traveled to Orlando, Florida, and to a Sociable Cities Summit to actually look at best practices around the country to see what other cities who had a vibrant nightlife like we had, what they were doing. And what we found was we needed to create our own way of doing things. And so that's what we did. We did a lot of individual meetings and stakeholder meetings with club owners and business owners in the downtown, 3 public meetings. And we actually, and typically, depending on the topic, you don't see a lot of public input at these meetings, and our meetings were packed. So there was a lot of interest in seeing what we were going to do in the downtown to really kind of see if we couldn't mitigate those safety issues. And so current public safety plan was adopted by council on September 10th, 2013, and then went into effect in October of the same year. So what businesses does the plan apply to? So that's I always like this, and this is ordinance language: assembly group A2, A3, or A4 occupancy. That's all, the legal jargon of fire prevention and protection within structures for occupancy load and levels. So pursuant to Chapter 36 of Scottsdale Revised Code, and engage in one or more of the following. These were the big things that if a business engages in any one of these things, they're going to be subject to the public safety plan ordinance. Age verification is requested for admittance, provide a DJ, provide an adult services defined by section 16237, a teen dance center, which we haven't had in a long time, but it's a teen dance center as defined by 16391, or they utilize a promoter. And we see that a lot. Sorry, that's my shout out to the Devil House from the 80s. That was a teen dance center back then. Those of you who grew up in Arizona will appreciate that.
They had plastic pitchers and they didn't break when they bounced, so it worked.
Yeah, yes, Mayor, that is absolutely true. The Devil House was very, very popular back then. Some more background, it really established a ratio to, and this has been a big help for us, it established a ratio of security personnel to patrons. And that's a big deal when we look at how many people come into a lot of our establishments on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday night when we have 10, 12, or 15,000 people in Old Town. So the staffing was dictated at at least one security officer per 50 patrons for the first 500 patrons, and at least one additional security officer per 75 patrons thereafter during peak hours. And we can talk about peak hours, which typically is about 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Some exceptions to the ratios were allowed with the chief of police and/or fire chief approval based on percentage of total gross food sales, size, type, and safety conditions of the venue. The big thing for us is that it also required the hiring of off-duty police officers after a specific number of public safety plan events. And those were typically related to violence, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the number of officers, off-duty officers, and the duration of hiring could be waived based on the discretion of the police chief, but we never really did that. If you had a violent incident or a series of violent incidents, then this would be triggered. And I'm happy to tell you that it didn't happen that often. When we instituted in October of 2013, for the first 2 years, we had several times where we had to enact the ordinance and have a bar or club hire off-duty police officers, but that has really waned over the last several years, and I'll explain a little bit more of that moving forward. The idea was businesses with 2 or more public safety incidents within 1 week period or 3 or more in a month would be required to retain the services of a minimum of 2 police officers for up to 3 months, or a minimum of 3 months, but you had to have 3 consecutive months without public safety incidents. So it really brought a lot of the clubs into compliance with how well their folks were trained by us, and the level of violence inside the club. And then we'll talk about the difference between the violence we were seeing back then prior to October of 13 when this ordinance was enacted, because we saw a lot of violence that was taking place inside the club. Now what we wind up seeing is kind of what we expected, is that the violence is outside of the clubs, which is better for us, and I'll share that momentarily. Related to significant violence, businesses with 1 or more public safety incidents involving use of or threatened use of a deadly weapon or deadly instrument would automatically, or death or catastrophic bodily injury would automatically trigger the PSP, and that club would be required to hire off-duty police officers, extra security for that period of 3 months. Why? A lot of discussion about why we needed this back then, and you couldn't just talk about, the violence. Really, a lot of the discussion was about, we wanted to increase the communication between the police department, the fire department, with our very vibrant and ever-growing number of establishments, and have better communications with them related to how they train their staff. Training prior to this was hit and miss at best. And in a lot of clubs, it was nearly non-existent. We wanted to promote compliance while developing a real positive working relationship, assist them in liquor law knowledge, which it was lacking, legal issues and customer service, reduce the chances of an emergency incident, and minimize the impact of an incident should it occur, and we did have them occur, and improve a safe and effective handling of an emergency when it occurred. One of the things that it did for us, which was great, was it really increased the level of working relationship between us, the bar staff, the security staff, the owners, the general managers, because now the PD provides all of the security training, or the beginnings of the security training to them, liquor law training, de-escalation training, that type of training to really diffuse situations inside the club. They've gotten very good at that. In fact, they've gotten so good at it that they wind up then just getting them out of the club, and then things tend to happen in the street. So what do we want to do? What we're recommending for your review and your direction to staff is a couple significant changes or amendments to the plan. The first of which is in definitions. We want to update a couple of the definitions or introduce a definition of control of business. Control means the power to direct or cause the direction of the management and policies of an applicant, licensee, or controlling person in any way. And introduce the definition of controlling person. Controlling person means a person directly or indirectly possessing control of a business. The reason is these definitions will help us identify who is responsible for the business. There are additions proposed in multiple sections of the PSP to ensure controlling persons can be held accountable for the business they control. What we found over the last 8 years is that it has been difficult on occasion when we have an incident to find who is really the controlling person in the business, who is really running things. And so this tightens that up a little bit for us to be able to identify those folks. We also want to introduce a definition for significant bodily injury. While Arizona revised statutes talks about significant bodily injury, we also want to add that significant bodily injury means an injury that causes permanent or temporary substantial disfigurement, permanent or temporary substantial loss or impairment of any body, organ, or part, or a fracture of any body part, excluding a fractured nose, because if we did that, we'd have a lot of public safety plan incidents. We have a lot of broken noses in the downtown. It just adds for clarity for portions of the PSP that refer to different types of violent acts. It differentiates them better, we think, than they currently are. Number 2 is update section 2355, public safety plan submittal and how those are submitted. 2355 lists documents required for the submittal of a public safety plan. They include hours of operation, crowd management, floor plans, employee lists, and evacuation routes, amongst other items. Introduce a requirement for line management plan, which is really important for us, and I'll get to that in a minute. Introduce the requirement to disclose locations of surveillance equipment and surveillance data storage. I know it'd be surprising to note that when we have an incident that sometimes the people that we're dealing with at a club will like, we don't have cameras. Well, what about that one? Oh, I guess we do have cameras. Okay, where's the data? We're not recording. Can we see that? Yeah, can we go back? Well, it looks like it's recording. Sorry, we deleted it. So we need a little bit more teeth in this to address the surveillance issue. Introduce a requirement for employees to attend court when the business or patrons are involved in a criminal matter. You'd be surprised or not surprised how many people don't want to show up to court when there's a public safety incident in their particular establishment. These proposed requirements are intended to improve patron safety and provide victims, suspects, and investigators with a more comprehensive evidence in court so that these just don't fall by the wayside due to a lack of involvement or a lack of evidence that we were able to obtain the night of the incident. Number 3, add failure to comply with uniform requirements to section 2372. If you've been in the downtown and seen some of the bars and nightclubs, you'll see that we want to really tighten up the requirement for how security staff is identified. Security uniforms have been identified as definitely a challenge for us. Being unmarked or poorly marked security personnel have regularly led to altercations because somebody in the club now who's about to be thrown out is somebody puts their hands on them. They can't see security or anything on that person. They think they're being attacked. Now a fight ensues. And it really winds up being with staff. When that person doesn't know it's staff, they just think they're being attacked by some random person who has poorly marked security. Updates to acceptable security attire is proposed, and only acceptably dressed security can be counted on as on duty. And that goes back to the how many security staff per patrons. You have to be properly identified. It's important because 2372 already includes required ratios of security to patrons, and only acceptably dressed personnel can count towards those ratios. And then except otherwise authorized by law, business required to have a public safety plan pursuant to this article should not allow its personnel to act as security personnel unless first meeting the uniform requirement. I can't share with you how big a deal this is. It's just, we're seeing, again, we thought we had this written well in the initial ordinance, but it just wasn't clean enough. It wasn't tight enough. So you have the security uniforms, I know I hear them called outfits sometimes, really are about being able to be seen. When you see this, you recognize that authority inside the bar or the club. We believe it will definitely mitigate instances of unmarked staff from getting into physical altercations unless otherwise authorized by law. Number 4, We have a lot of little changes. It's been 8 years. Failure to preserve, introduction of a new section 2374, failure to preserve evidence of potential public safety incident. And this is what I was referring to earlier. And it's really about our ability to require them to have that. Businesses that have a public safety plan are required to preserve any and all evidence of public safety incident for 1 year. This evidence includes, but is not limited to, all surveillance footage. Everybody has cameras now. 8 years ago, not all the clubs have cameras. Today, they all have cameras. This evidence includes the surveillance footage, photos, video captures, audio, video recordings, and/or logbooks. And then provided to us upon request within 24 hours of a violent incident. Number 5, line management. I mentioned before, as you see the clubs get more and more popular, and yet I didn't think that was possible, but they continue to be very, very popular here. This is the place to come. It's very vibrant. It's very exciting. And so now what we're seeing is lines. And some very long lines, and it shall be unlawful for any business required to have a public safety plan pursuant to this article to do any of the following involving a line of patrons: failure to maintain orderly lines of patrons, allow a line of patrons to obstruct traffic or pedestrians. Seen it, been a lot of people in the street, so we need to make sure that there's proper line management. Failure to have security personnel present and engaging in routine line checks. Once a line has more than 50 people in it, which yes, that does happen. People will wait for lengthy periods of time to get into some of the popular clubs. And fail to remove and or trespass disorderly patrons when authorized by state law to do so. So a lot of information. These are the public safety plan ordinance has been really great for us. In fact, a lot of other cities who have even smaller entertainment districts than ours have come to look at it and adopted some portions of our ordinance. It was pretty unique for the time when it was approved by council in 2013. And so this is an opportunity for us as we see an uptick in violence in our entertainment district for Luis and I and our staff to say, is there an opportunity for us to make some amendments to this, bring them to you for your review and to move forward with some discussion on this. The last thing I'll share with you is the success of it. We've had a great deal of success with it simply because what we found prior to this was the violence was happening in the clubs. And when a violent incident happens inside the club, that usually brings in a whole bunch of other people jump into the mix. And we wound up seeing more injuries, more arrests, more problems inside the club. And to be honest with you, then sending my folks into a club where there's a massive brawl is very dangerous for the officers responding to that. So what it's done for us is now what we see is, since we're training the security staff, what we're seeing is that something will occur inside. Staff has gotten very good at getting the offending person outside, and then it gets ugly out front. But then we're out in front, or we get called to the front, where we have a little bit more room to maneuver and a little bit more flexibility. So yes, we're seeing some violent uptick in violence in the downtown, and we can happy to entertain questions about that as well. But these amendments, we think, will just provide the necessary tweaks to continue to provide that great level of safety in the downtown. Questions?
Thank you. At this point, I see Councilwoman Littlefield, Vice Mayor Janik afterward. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Whitehead and Vice Mayor Janik.
Okay, I'm always first. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Great presentation. Thank you, Luis. We have, obviously, this, 8 years ago made a big difference, and I'm really pleased. And we do have a spike. So I think all of these recommended changes are good. I just have a couple of questions. On the gun, so we are seeing just a spike in crime and a spike in just general incidents of illegal guns. I mean, would that be accurate?
Yes, ma'am, that's accurate.
Yeah. And then we're also seeing an increase in assault on police, I believe.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So I think, obviously our vibrant downtown, I think the biggest threat to that is to have a image of being a dangerous downtown. So again, I really appreciate this. I wanted to know on how to deal with this cause. Like, I know you want to put the people outside, and that makes a lot of sense, but we've had a lot of incidents, like a young man drowning and he had just been drinking way too much in a bar, or we have Councilman Durham had quite an extensive list to share yesterday and it seemed to involve one club, I don't know any of them, where there's just one time after another, people that left the club ended up in big gunfights. How does that connection, how do we reduce that? Because we want them outside maybe, but ideally we'd like them not to be in gunfights. Any thoughts?
Yes, Councilwoman Whitehead, thanks for the question. We have definitely seen an uptick in gun-related calls for service in the downtown. Luis and I were talking about it before council started today, and we're seeing anywhere between a 20 and 25% uptick from year over year. Certainly, if I look at last year, I discount last year. We had a very low incident last year, but we are seeing that increase, and they're all connected. All of these issues are connected. When you add alcohol to 10 or 12 or 15,000 people in a fairly small area, when you look at the U or Craftsman Court or those areas off of Stetson, 6th Avenue, that when you have all of those clubs in the same general area, and as the night goes on and more alcohol has been served, then you tend to get patrons who get into scuffles with one another, and that spills out into the roadway. We prefer it to spill out on the roadway as opposed to being inside, and I shared that with you. But how do we stop that? That's a more difficult question. So
let me change my question a little bit. If the scuffle happens inside, there are consequences to the club. I guess my question is, how can we extend those consequences if they send the scuffle outside?
Perfect. So yeah, PSP apply, actually the PSP and Arizona liquor laws apply to inside the bar and outside if we can tie the altercation to the club itself. Let's say something happens inside the club and it's an altercation that does not violate the PSP. It's not a public safety incident, but then it becomes one outside, or it becomes a fight or a brawl or injuries, and if we can tie it back to the club through it and then take a report, then we'll forward that information on to the Arizona Department of Liquor Licensing and Control for their review.
So another question is, we don't want to disincentivize them admitting that people are about to go out and have a brawl. So is there some way that we can tie it to the club, but yet give some kind of benefit for early reporting, or for, so that we're not looking at footage trying to connect? It seems like a bureaucratic job to try to connect the fight with the bar.
You bring up a great point, because we found that initially in the first several years, and we're still seeing it now, where if a scuffle starts inside and there are any injuries, they're required to report it to us. But quietly, if they can get it out and not call us and break it up and it goes away before we get there, then so much the better for them. Typically what we find is our bike officers, or if we're running a gun suppression detail down there, then we see it as it spills out of the club. And so, yeah, they're required by this ordinance to notify us of a public safety incident. It's now a matter of, are they going to? And most of our clubs are very good. They're good businesses for us. We have a great relationship with them, and we've held them to account over the last many years. So they've gotten very used to this over the last 8 years. And so we get a lot of contact, but I'm not naive enough to think that we're getting contact in all of them. We're not. And so oftentimes there aren't the teeth that you're talking about for every single incident. It's catch as catch can. It's when we find it or when they call us, then we enforce it.
Okay, so another question is, you and your officers have done a great job really stepping up enforcement, and that is definitely the way to send the message that Scottsdale is not a great place to commit crimes, but that enforcement has come at a cost to all of our taxpayers. I guess I would like to have some analysis of how do we last night we talked, or 2 nights ago, we talked about having development pay for itself. Maybe we need a discussion on making sure that if we have to have overtime officers have a look at to make sure that's balanced, and that's different from this, or maybe it's not. But I just want to point out that I don't want our taxpayers subsidizing overtime police, because we want to make sure that it's safe downtown. And
Councilman Whitehead, if I can, I think that's a very valid question. I'll share with you that in terms of budget, and my budget for this fiscal year, the city manager and you have authorized a certain amount of overtime for us. And I will tell you that we, even with these details, we typically stay within that overtime allotment. Otherwise, Dr. Thompson's going to be on me about how much overtime money that I spend. And we try to be very fiscally responsible with that overtime and apply in those areas where we have the most need. And this was that occurrence.
No, absolutely. I'm just it's a more of an esoteric question. I trust your budgeting. The question is, are we getting, is the district paying for itself? So it's not a matter of you staying, and it doesn't need to be answered because I have some other, other ideas on how we can reduce the cost and reduce the crime here. I love the expanded surveillance. The old broken window. I'd like to see, more prevention. You had talked about a trash, that the clubs used to kind of join in together and pay for a company that kept the district cleaner. Is that something, I can't remember if that can be, and this is really a question probably for Luis, if that can be part of this ordinance, or is that a separate deal?
I defer to Luis on that one, whether we can make them be part of that. It was in the past, a lot of the bars and nightclubs, they formed their own group to clean up the downtown after bar close or before people woke up in the morning. And so that is kind of waned a little bit. So whether or not we can make that as part of the ordinance, I'll leave to Luis. I will tell you that we are doing bar summits with them again. So we're meeting very regularly, and part of those bar summits are talking about trash collection and being good neighbors.
Because I do get a lot of complaints. So let's see what Luis says, and we'll make it work whether it's this ordinance or not. I think we really need to focus on that.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. That's a really good question. Most of our bars these days, unless they're grandfathered in, have a CUP requirement. And usually in the CUP requirement, there's actually a maintenance type component that does cover trash. So trash itself is not really a public safety issue in terms of this. So I don't think it's within the scope of this particular ordinance, but it can be addressed in other ways. And I do believe in a lot of the CUPs, they do have some sort of maintenance type, cleanup type requirement.
Okay, thank you. And so that kind of segues to my last kind of area of comments. Again, I have no requested changes to this. I think it's fabulous, and I'm very grateful to all those involved. But it's one thing to enact a new ordinance. It's another thing to enforce it. So I kind of want to touch on some just ideas that this council should consider. Number one, we have an increase in assault on PD, which is very, very concerning. And that goes to the county. Assaulting a police officer is a felony, but it's prosecuted at the county. Am I correct?
It should be, yes. But oftentimes, depending on the level of assault, it gets kicked back down to us too, as a misdemeanor.
It is my belief that if every time one of our officers gets assaulted, there's a prosecution, that will reduce assaults on our police officers. So I just want to bring that up because I hope that this council as a body can take action to make sure that the county does prosecute or find ways to help the county prosecute. Let's see. Also, I think that it's easy to see the police and the effectiveness of our police, but I want to talk about both sides, the pre and the post crime. I think that the city manager has heard from us a number of times that we need probably more code enforcement. Again, that broken window concept to try to create an environment where it just looks like not quite the right place to commit crimes. And then on the back end, once we do have a crime that's occurred, make sure that we have the resources and the right people in place to prosecute. Because ultimately what we want to do is make our police, go help people with, cats and trees or whatever. I guess that's firemen, but we want to reduce the crime. We want to reduce the necessary police presence. So I think we really have to look at code enforcement and the prosecution side as well as just PD resources. So thank you.
Councilwoman Whitehead, if I can, I think you bring up some great, you mentioned the broken windows theory, which that kind of translates into the old crime prevention through environmental design. And so there are some things that we'll bring forward that city manager and I will talk about just in terms of, increased or better lighting, bollards and those things that we'll have some discussion about. Just, I think that will help us in the future with some of those crime prevention thoughts. Thank you.
And I will now make a comment because, of course, we're agendized for the discussion of what's presented here. And there may be other issues, but we must stay on the topic. And I would just ask if there's other issues that might need to be brought forward at another time. I would, again, want to, or I would expect, and we have not had a motion yet, we're having some comments here, that there might be a motion that would ask that some ordinance text amendments be brought back. And that would, of course, become public, and then we could look at those particular things. Now, we're still including our discussion here, but that would be the next step at this point. Vice Mayor Janik, please.
I just have two questions and a comment. Very, very nice ordinance. You've done a lot of work on this, and I think it's definitely going to improve enforcement and safety. My first question has to do with the availability of off-duty peace officers. There are requirements. If there are certain violations, you need to have the peace officer. Well, what if you can't find any? What happens next?
Vice Mayor Janik, that's a great question, and that happens to us. Scottsdale is an event city, and so my officers at our premium for a whole lot of other events. And so that does happen in the downtown with just even regular venues that want to hire police officers off duty. So we work with another company called Law Enforcement Specialists that employs off-duty police officers from around the valley and around the state to fill those postings.
Okay.
So we tap into a much broader market of police officers.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question has to do with your proposed change, number 1, update definitions. I just want to make sure that these definitions have been vetted and that they've been used in other cities with the police department, and that do you
Yes,
know
they
my
have.
question?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
I'll let Luis, since that's a legalese question, but he and I've worked on this and he's reviewed that.
Thank you.
Mayor and members of the council, thank you again. Yes, the definition of control has been very well vetted. It's actually borrowed straight from Title IV, which governs liquor law and licenses. We've also used that definition in other parts of our city code.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you.
Next, Council Member Durham, and then Councilwoman Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question was, I think you've addressed this a little bit. You've said there is an obligation on on a bar or a club or whatever to report an incident that happens inside. Can you tell me exactly what that level of reporting is? What events they're required to report?
Yes. So Councilmember Durham, what they're required is we talked about what a public safety incident, either that 2 in a week or 3 in a month, those are violent encounters, fist fights, things like that inside the club, or 1 significant use of a weapon or threatened use of a deadly weapon, or serious injury. They're required to report those incidents if those take place inside the club. And so when we get into the full ordinance, if you see the full ordinance, there are also adverse consequences or punitive areas where there are fines assessed if they don't comply with that. And so initially there was some struggle in 2014-ish, end of 13, 14, there was a little bit of struggle to make sure that they were complying. And so we gave a lot of warnings initially, and then we got people into compliance. And so now they're very used to having to report. Again, are they reporting every single one? I guarantee you they're not, especially if they're able to keep it quiet, hush everybody out, and it doesn't break out into a brawl in front. Then I promise you they're not calling us on every single one of those. But if we find out then we wind up having a conversation. In fact, I see one of my liquor detectives here who spoke to you on Tuesday night. I have 2 liquor detectives that are responsible for regular communication with all of our PSP holders, and that's a regular discussion with them about mandatory reporting.
And my second question is that, as you've indicated, part of the result of the ordinance is to push the brawls and the fights outside. Are there sufficient people, officers or security personnel or whatever, to keep it fairly under control on the outside in the streets? And
Yes, sir. Most of the time there is. Fortunately for us, there is not. If there were a brawl at every single establishment at the same time, no. but that typically it's one here and then it's one down the road. 15 minutes later it's one over here. So we already bring a lot of our specialty units to bear on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. Our bike unit, our street crimes unit. We have extra resources that are scheduled to work those nights anyway. So we upstaff that, our mounted unit. And so we have the necessary resources to deal with those unless all of them break down at once. And then all of those clubs also have door staff. They have interior security, and then they have door staff that assist in those issues with us.
Great, thank you.
Councilwoman Littlefield and then Councilwoman Caputi.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think as we've all seen lately, our downtown is suffering from an increase in criminal activity. And I believe that we should listen to those who are on the front lines trying to hold that line as what should be done and how we should take care of this problem. It only makes sense. And also to the comments of the council, they make sense too. These are all really, really good things. The requests that are before us today for the proposed changes of this ordinance are very rational, and they're very simple to do. And I think they make a lot of sense. So I would like to move that we adopt the proposed changes to our public safety plan as presented.
Second. And I do have a discussion, or did I have?
I'm good.
Mayor,
Yes, and go ahead.
I'm sorry. We're on agenda tonight just to provide direction to staff to look at these amendments, take them out to the community, get public input, and bring them back to council for approval, not to actually approve them tonight.
Oh,
which is how I heard the motion. So if we.
That's what I
correct
thought
that.
we were supposed to do also. But if that's the case, then I make the proposal that we do that, and with as a fast a speed as we can manage to get it done.
Very good.
And I second that, agreeing that law enforcement has excellent judgment as well as legal, and that we would look for testing it in the community as well as specific text that would relate to that, so that we would it would then come back. I see we have a motion and a second. I do have a hand waving from the city attorney, and then we have Councilwoman Caputi. Okay, Councilwoman Caputi, discussion on the motion.
Thank you, Chief. I think that it's really timely that we update this public safety plan ordinance. We all know that there's been an uptick in crime lately in Scottsdale. We don't like to think about Scottsdale as being a place of crime, but we do have to acknowledge the reality. I know Chief Rodbell, one of his favorite sayings was that if we just could get people to close their garage doors, we could get rid of 80% of the crime in Scottsdale, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
No, ma'am.
So first of all, I love the idea about, you can't underestimate outfits. They're super important. So I do like making them very specific for people in the clubs. Councilwoman Whitehead and I had attended a neighborhood meeting a month or so ago, and it was interesting to listen to the neighbors that were most impacted downtown. The change that you made concerning being clearer about who has control, I love that, because that did come up. If you remember in the meeting, people were saying that was very confusing when there was an altercation or an incident. who do you call? Who's in control? Where's the owner? Maybe they're out of state. And I think tightening up on that is a really good idea. The other thing is the video surveillance. I know we had chatted about that a little in that meeting as well. And you even underscored this about how some of these owners don't even realize they have video, then they realize they do, but they've already erased it or didn't record it. And some of the owners were talking about coordinating efforts on that with the police, having a system that maybe spoke back to the police department. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
The technology was over my head, but it sounded like a great idea.
Yes, in fact, thank you for the question, Councilwoman Caputi. When we talk about, and we'll talk about in the future, and city manager and I have had a lot of discussions about a real-time crime center and how we stood up the beginnings of real-time crime center. That's the opportunity that we can take in video feeds in a real-time crime center and see that live. That's for another discussion, but we have that ability through software and technology to actually view that. So it's the issue that was brought up and that you bring up again was business owners or property owners who own that building, who know that there are cameras there, but are leasing that to tenants who don't know that there are cameras there. So that's something that we're working on as well.
Again, I think this is a great idea. We definitely should move forward with having a ordinance that's updated. One last really fast question, because it was brought up just a minute ago and it caught my ear. It's not actually illegal to have a weapon in our old town, right? It's just illegal to discharge it.
It is not illegal to have a weapon in Arizona. It's not, as long as you have your constitutional rights. It's not illegal to have a concealed weapon either. Now it is illegal to have a weapon inside a bar, but outside the club, people have guns in their cars. They have guns on them, and outside of the liquor establishment, it's not illegal.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I heard that term illegal gun and I just wanted to clarify. Okay, thank you. Great.
Very good. At this point, we have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Thank you. Unanimous. We always save the, thank you, Chief, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We always save the best for last. And we will have a quarterly, the financial report by our treasurer, Sonia Andrews. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Our fiscal year in 2021 just ended on June 30th. We have closed out books for fiscal year 2021. And so tonight, I'd like to share with you some preliminary numbers for the fiscal year 2021. These numbers have not been audited yet, and we expect our auditors to complete the audit sometime in November. So if there's any significant change to these numbers, we will bring it to your attention. Next slide. So to put some perspective on our financial results for 2021, I would like to highlight the economic factors at play throughout the year. Since the pandemic started, there has been over $3 trillion of federal stimulus and federal pandemic aid. Arizona received $32 billion, and this is in the form of PPP loans, unemployment checks, direct stimulus payments, etc. Personal income has risen. Asset values have also risen significantly in terms of stock market gains, home price appreciations. And as the economy opened up, consumer spending was very strong with pent-up demand and also a lot of money to spend. The state of Arizona saw record growth in their tax revenues. Next slide. At the state level, sales tax, income tax, and the state's overall general fund experienced record growth in 2021. Just like the state, we also saw very strong revenue growth. Next slide. So as you can see on the slide, here at the city of Scottsdale for fiscal year 2021, which started in July of 2020 and ended June 30th, our local sales tax revenues increased by 11% over the previous year. State shared 13%, and our overall general fund revenues increased by 6%. And in addition, We also received some American Rescue Plan funds in fiscal year 2021, about 15 million of it. As you know, sales tax and state share revenues are the main source of revenues for our general fund. Next slide, please. Our general fund is our primary operating fund with revenues totaling over 300 million. And as you can see on this chart, sales tax, state share taxes, and property taxes make up 75% of our general fund revenue sources. Now, when we adopted the budget in 2020, it was back in June, 2021, I'm sorry. It was back in June of 2020. And we had no idea what the recovery was going to look like. So we budgeted very, very conservatively, and clearly the recovery was a lot faster and stronger than we had expected. Next slide, please. And as you can see, compared to budget, our sales tax, state shared revenues, and even our charges for services are more than 20% positive over budget. In fact, almost every category of our sales tax revenues has recovered to or above pre-pandemic levels. Next slide. And here you can see that all our major categories, retail, auto, construction, rental, including our dining and entertainment, which is our restaurants and bars, have recovered well above our, the year before and also pre-pandemic levels, except for hotels and motels. Hotels and motels have still not quite fully recovered yet. And some of these industries are still struggling with hiring. And if there's one thing to take away from this presentation tonight, it is that this very strong V-shaped recovery and growth is fueled by all the stimulus dollars at play in the economy, and the historically low interest rate environment, and also the high asset appreciation. And also to keep in mind that this revenue growth is not expected to be sustained. And so we continue to be very conservative and disciplined in our spending. Next slide, please. So moving on to our spending, which is our uses and expenditures. As a city that provides services to our residents, our expenditures in our general fund consist primarily of personnel costs, that's salary and wages, benefits, for our public safety, community services, public works, and other city employees. Next slide, please. And as mentioned before, we remain conservative and fiscally disciplined. We ended fiscal year 2021 below our budget and even below our 2020 expenditure levels. Next slide, please. And across all our divisions, we had positive budget savings. And that is thanks to you, our city council, our city manager, and leadership team. We again remain fiscally conservative and disciplined in our spending. So we've been talking about the city's general fund revenues and expenditures so far, and now I'd like to turn our attention to the other significant revenue and expenditures for the city, and that is our enterprise funds. Next slide, please. Our enterprise funds are our utility and airport operations that are self-supporting through charges and fees. Our water and wastewater operations are our largest enterprise operations. As you can see on the chart to the right, expenditures for our utility operations are not predominantly personnel costs like in the general fund. That's because we have significant other costs to run those utility systems, like cost to purchase water, deliver water, collect sewer, and also treatment costs. Next slide, please. Revenues for our water and wastewater are very much affected by the weather. We ended fiscal year 2021 with 9% over budget in our water revenues than expected because we had an exceptionally dry summer, and maybe the COVID stay at home had something to do with it as well. And also we were conservative in our expenditures. We ended the year with expense and positive variances in all our expenditure categories. Next slide, please. And my last slide is just to update you on the expenditures for our 2019 bond program. We have issued 55 million of debt to date and spent a little bit over 25 million. And Dave Lipinski, our city engineer, will be providing more details on the bond program at his next quarterly meeting update. And that ends my presentation, and I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no hands up from the council. I thank you very much for the thorough presentation and really appreciate it. At this point, I will move on to, we have finished our regular agenda items, and I will move on to public comment. Public comment is the opportunity for people to sound off before council, as long as it's not agendized. I see none, and therefore I close public comment. There's an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. Moving on to the citizen petition. By charter, of course, we will accept citizen petitions, and we received one hand-delivered. And I just want to recognize at this point that we have received, and we had some testimony from the people who provided. And reading the petition, it appears to say that it asks of the below signed petitioners is that our concerns be heard, acted upon, and revisited after 1 year of project completion or as deemed necessary. So we, for the record, are receiving this information as presented and signed by the petitioners. I believe we have choices, which would be to acknowledge receipt, and there's no action at this time that I would recommend. But Councilwoman Whitehead, did you have okay, so I just want to complete that item and acknowledge it, and it will be of record. Next, we're moving on to mayor and council items, which is, sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mayor, I apologize.
Right.
We need a vote on the action.
Okay. I recommend we take no action, but acknowledge the receipt, and we will monitor it in the future. Councilmember Millhaven.
I'd like to make a motion to ask the city manager to respond to the petition with a copy to the city council.
Okay, we have no responses, no seconds for either of them. I understand what you're saying. Again, we have three choices. One would be direct the city manager to agendize the petition for further discussion. Choice number two is direct the city manager to investigate the matter and prepare a written response to the council with a copy to the petitioner. Choice number three, per our charter, is to take no action. And I believe acknowledging it is proper. At this point, it seems to ask for future consideration a year from now and to monitor the situation. Councilwoman Littlefield, what would you suggest?
Thank you, Mayor. I would suggest that we follow action item number 2.
Okay.
Which I believe is very similar to Councilwoman Millhaven's request to have a report from the city manager brought back to the council, delivered to us. So that I think it.
Yeah, that's clear. Okay, I would second that.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Thank you very much. At this point, we will be looking at, well, there is a mayor and council item as shown on our agenda. So Councilwoman Whitehead.
I just would like to request my colleagues support me in having staff come back to see if a letter to the county or something that might be effective to increase the prosecutions when we have these assaults on our officers. It just to provide us direction on how we might help that situation, increase the prosecution.
Councilmember Millhaven.
Are you suggesting it be an agenda item or just have the city manager look into and give us some information?
Thank you. Yeah, just have some direction from the city manager on what this council might do to communicate with our colleagues at the county.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I have a quick comment on that. I already asked Luis a while ago to investigate it legally as to what we can and can't do. And I do believe he's actively working on that.
Then I will retract my motion.
Thank you. At this point, we will move to, item number 13 as posted is regarding the boards and commission. At this point, I will turn it over to Vice Mayor Janik. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, the City Council will be nominating Scottsdale residents interested in serving on citizen advisory boards, commissions, and committees. The Scottsdale City Council is responsible for establishing city policies and enacting laws in support of those policies. The council relies on volunteer, citizen-based boards and commissions to research issues and make recommendations in support of the council's mission and goals. The information and recommendations provided by council-appointed advisory boards is a valuable tool in helping council members in their deliberations. Nominations this evening will be made for positions on the following boards, commissions, and committees: the Building Advisory Board of Appeals, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, Historic Preservation Commission, Human Relations Commission, Human Services Commission, Judicial Appointments Advisory Board, Tourism Development Commission, and Transportation Commission. Appointments for these positions will be made at the special city council meeting on Tuesday, September 14th. Let's get started. Building Advisory Board of Appeals, 3 openings. The Building Advisory Board of Appeals has the jurisdiction to recommend that minor variances in the electrical, plumbing, and mechanical application of the building code be granted, and that alternative construction methods or materials be allowed. The board has 3 open positions since 2020. There are 3 vacancies and 2 applicants. The applicants are Brian Brose and Michael Kravitz. I will now entertain nominations for the Building Advisory Board of Appeals. Each committee member can nominate 2 applicants. I will start with Councilwoman Caputi.
Brian Brose and Michael Kravitz.
Thank you. Brian Brose and Michael Kravitz have been nominated. Next, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. There is 1 opening. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee receives reports on the city's progress in implementing the bond program, reviews any proposed project changes to the program, and provides comments to the City Council with respect to the bond program as the committee deems appropriate. Lorraine Rogers' term expires in September. She is eligible for reappointment and has submitted an application for consideration. There is 1 vacancy and 1 applicant. The applicant is Lorraine Rogers. I will now entertain a nomination for the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee. I will start with Councilwoman Whitehead.
Lorraine Rogers.
Lorraine Rogers has been nominated. Thank you. Historic Preservation Commission, 1 opening. The Historic Preservation Commission oversees the development and management of Scottsdale's Historic Preservation Program. Special qualifications, as outlined in the Scottsdale City Code, each member shall have demonstrated special interest, knowledge, or experience in at least one of the following: building construction, history, architectural history, real estate, historic preservation law, or other historic preservation related fields. Blair Schweiger resigned from the commission in August. There is 1 vacancy and 1 applicant. The applicant is Rose Smith. I will now entertain a nomination for the Historic Preservation Committee, and I will start with Councilperson Milhaven.
Thank you. Rose Smith.
Thank you. Rose Smith has been nominated. Human Relations Commission, 2 openings. The Human Relations Commission advocates and promotes all dimensions of diversity. The commission acts as an advisory body to the mayor, city council, and staff to make recommendations on ways to encourage mutual respect and understanding among people, to discourage prejudice and discrimination, and to work towards cultural awareness and unity. Terms for James Eneman and Emily Hinchman expire in September. Both are eligible for reappointment and have submitted applications for consideration. There are 2 vacancies and 8 applicants. The applicants are Denise Atwood, Teresa Babcock, Ashish Chopra, Lee Cooley, Tina Drews, James Eneman, Emily Hinchman, and Robin Murphy. I will now entertain nominations for the Human Relations Commission. Each council member can nominate 2 applicants. I will start with Mayor Ortega.
James Enneman and Emily Hitchman.
No additional.
Myself, no addition. Councilmember Durham,
No additional.
Councilmember Caputi,
No additional.
Councilmember Whitehead,
No additional?
Councilmember Millhaven.
No additional.
Thank you. James Eneman and Emily Hinchman have been nominated, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. Human Services Commission, there are 3 openings. The Human Services Commission provides advisory recommendations to staff and the City Council on human services priorities and programs, and funding allocations for Scottsdale Cares, Community Development Block Grants, Home, Human Services Emergency, and General Funds. Terms for Janice Eng and Andrew Song expire in September. Ashley Blaine's term expires in October. Janice Eng is ineligible for reappointment. Ashley Song and Ashley Blaine were both eligible for reappointment. However, neither submitted an application for consideration for a new term. There are 3 vacancies and 7 applicants. The applicants are Dawn Abel, Nancy Cantor, Jeff Jameson, Diane Lester, Tricia Serlin, Neil Shearer, and Paula Sturgeon. I will now entertain nominations for the Human Services Commission. Each council member can nominate 3 applicants. I will start with Councilperson Littlefield.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I nominate Nancy Cantor, Jeff Jameson, and Tricia Serlin. Tricia Serlin.
I nominate Nancy Cantor, Jeff Jameson, and Diane Lester. Next, we will go to Councilmember Durham.
I would nominate Don Abel.
Thank you. Next, I will go to Councilwoman Caputi.
Tricia Serlin, Neil Shearer, Paula Sturgeon.
Thank you. Next, I will go to Councilwoman Whitehead.
Nancy Cantor, Diane Lester and Neil Shearer. Sorry, I can't remember who's been.
Okay.
I have no additional.
Thank you. We have nominations for Dawn Abel, Nancy Cantor, Jeff Jameson. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor.
Okay. I would nominate Nancy Cantor. And I will nominate Jeff Jameson. And I nominate Dawn Abel.
Thank you. And now I need a little bit of help. Everybody
Well, it
has
looks
been-
everybody's was nominated, so they'll move on to the next round.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, does it make any difference how many? I only nominated 1 person, but I was eligible to nominate 3. Does it make any difference?
Councilmember Durham, not for this round. This is just to
Okay.
nominate. You each can nominate whomever. But
Right.
during the appointment process, that's when you'll actually vote.
Right, okay, that's what I thought.
Thank you. Judicial Appointments Advisory Board, 2 openings, 1 Scottsdale Bar Representative and 1 Citizen Representative. The Judicial Appointments Advisory Board makes advisory recommendations to the City Council regarding the appointment and reappointment of full-time city judges. Special qualifications. The 7-member JAAB will consist of 2 active judges, 1 representative from both the State Bar and the Scottsdale Bar Associations, and 3 citizens appointed by the City Council who are not judges in any official capacity, nor retired judges, nor members of the State Bar of Arizona. Terms for Susan Galpin-Tyree and Robert Gruler expire in September. Both are eligible for reappointment and have submitted applications for consideration. Susan Galpin-Tyree represents the citizen representative position. Robert Gruler Jr. represents the Scottsdale Bar representative position and was nominated by the Scottsdale Bar to serve another term. There are 2 vacancies and 2 applicants. The applicants are Susan Galpin-Tyree, citizen rep applicant, and Robert Gruler Jr., Scottsdale Bar rep applicant. I will now entertain nominations for the Judicial Appointments Advisory Board. Each council member can nominate 2 applicants. And I will start with myself, and I nominate Susan Galpin-Tyree and Robert Gruler Jr. So Robert, Susan Galpin-Tyree and Robert Gruler Jr. have been nominated. Thank you. Tourism Development Commission, 2 openings, 1 industry rep and 1 Scottsdale hotelier. The Tourism Development Commission advises the City Council on matters concerning the expenditure of revenues from the transaction privilege tax on transient lodging, bed tax, designated for tourism development. Special qualifications. As specified in the Scottsdale City Code, the Tourism Development Commission shall consist of representatives of the tourism industry in Scottsdale, including a minimum of 4 Scottsdale hoteliers, 1 member of the Scottsdale Convention and Visitors Bureau, and a balance from elements of the tourism industry. Linda Dillenbeck's term expires in September and is ineligible for reappointment. She represented an industry representative position. Richard Newman's term expires in September. He is eligible for reappointment and has submitted an application for consideration. There is 1 industry position vacancy and 1 hotelier position vacancy and 2 applicants. The applicants are Chris Montgomery, industry rep applicant, and Richard Newman, Scottsdale hotelier applicant. I will now entertain nominations for the Tourism Development Commission. Each council member can nominate 2 applicants. And on this one, I will return back to Councilwoman Caputi. Oh, sorry. I will start with Councilmember Durham. I jumped ahead 1.
I would nominate Chris Montgomery as the industry representative and Richard Newman as the hotelier representative.
Thank you. We now have Chris Montgomery and Richard Newman nominated. And now our last one is the Transportation Commission, for which there's 1 opening. The Transportation Commission advises the City Council on matters relating to the safe and efficient movement of vehicles, transit, pedestrians, and bicycles. The commission provides a public forum to hear citizen complaints and requests regarding transportation matters. B. Kent Law's term expires in September. He is eligible for reappointment and has submitted an application for consideration. There is 1 vacancy and 2 applicants. The applicants are B. Kent Law and Carrie Wilcoxon. I will now entertain nominations for the Transportation Commission. Each council member can nominate 1 applicant. And now we will start with Councilwoman Caputi.
Carrie Wilcoxon.
Councilwoman Whitehead.
Kent Law.
That being said, we have Kent Law and Carrie Wilcoxon as nominated. This concludes our nomination process this evening. Individuals nominated will be contacted by the city staff with additional information. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all who have applied to serve on a citizen advisory board or commission. Even if you were not nominated, your application will remain on file for 1 year for consideration at a future date if there are additional vacancies. And I just wanted to say, this has been a difficult year for everybody, and I truly appreciate the number of people from our community that are willing to serve, knowing how much time is involved in this endeavor. So thank you very much. And now I will turn the meeting back over to our mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and echo your comments. With that, we are concluded with our agenda, and therefore I will, do I need a motion to adjourn? Yes, let's do it.
So move.
We have motion and a second. Please record your vote. Happy face. Thank you.